Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are today with the new high school principal, Jarrett Lambie. We will be interviewing him today to get to know a little bit about him and how he feels about some school issues. So, Mr. Lambie, welcome.
Thank you.
So welcome to the campus, and I'm just curious if you wanted to tell us a little bit about where you're from, both where you worked previously or where you're working right now, and then where you're actually from, if that's different.
They are different, yeah. So I was born in Canada, in a small town, not that small, city called Calgary, which is in Alberta, so by the Rocky Mountains. I went to university in my hometown because that was affordable for where I was in that time of life. And then before I actually graduated from university, I had my first teaching job in Bangkok, Thailand. I was there for 4 years. That's where I met my wife, who's an art teacher. And from there we moved to Malaysia. We were there for 11 years. That's where we had our son. And that's where I switched from teaching English and theory of knowledge to administration. And then after 5 years as an assistant principal there, I went to Seoul, South Korea. And I was there for 4 years as a high school principal. And now I'm moving here as the high school principal here at AIS.
Awesome. So, all over the place. Why Vienna?
We're looking for a particular kind of school for our son. That's a big choice, which is a little bit new for us. Instead of looking for career opportunities that are good for our careers, we're really trying to put our son in a particular kind of school. And then we are looking for a different experience for him. He's spent his whole life in Asia, so spending some time in Europe will be good. And as I told you earlier, I haven't lived in a place with clean skies for a long time, so that'll be good.
It's always nice.
Yeah, and this will be the first time my son's lived in a place where you drink water out of the tap. When we go on vacation, he always asks if he can brush his teeth with the tap water, or he's got to use bottled water. So it'll be a good experience for him to be in a developed country.
That's awesome. So, any first impressions of AIS? You've been here how many days so far?
This is my second day, but it's I was here for the interviews earlier.
Right.
So yeah, it is what I thought it was. It's a lot like the school we were at for the longest time in Malaysia. Really diverse population. And what we're looking for is, different definitions of success.
Right.
Like you talked about is, are you full diploma, or are you not full diploma? And there's different definitions of success, and kids who are looking at the whole planet as opportunities for post-secondary education rather than just looking at one definition of success and what's a good college acceptance and those kinds of things. So that part's good. Like the kids are really active here. They have a full day. They accomplish a lot. And faculty, of course, are concerned about kids doing too much,
right?
And that's a good problem to have. It's a lot better than being in a place where you're trying to convince kids to start new programs and get involved in doing things around the school. So it is what it appeared to be.
That's awesome. So I'm just curious, and I'm sure kids out there might be curious, but if you were to describe yourself as a high school student. I know it's a little bit different from the rest of the questions we'll be asking today.
Sure. AIS would have been a tough application for me as a high school student. Actually, the IB diploma program was just being offered in a few schools when I was finishing middle school. So I got an invitation to apply, and my brothers very wisely informed me that I didn't have the time management skills to be a full IB diploma student, which I think was probably true. So I was fairly active. I played some sports in high school, and definitely took some challenging classes, but not to the degree that I think the kids here, that kind of academic program, which was good. I grew up in college. I wasn't so mature in high school.
Obviously, AIS has had a lot of high school principals, a lot of directors, and with these new different principals and directors comes different types of leadership.
Sure.
Some more hands-on, some more hands-off, and some focusing towards different aspects of the school, more technology, extracurriculars. I mean, I guess our question to you is, what type of approach do you take to leading a high school and being a principal?
Well, I think early on, so for someone like you who's going to be a senior next year, it's going to look a little bit hands-off. But that's just because I'm smart enough not to be under the impression I know all the answers on the first day of school. So it'll take me some time to sort of get around, see what classes look like, see what the school day feels like, see what the activity program feels like. And there's always a question at schools like this about balance. And really what we want kids to get right is the balance. And the challenge is the balance isn't the same for everybody. Some kids can handle the most challenging academic load, they can play 3 seasons of sports, they can build houses, and there are other kids who that's not the right load for them. So great schools give kids the opportunities to maybe stretch a little too much and then get back on their feet and provide that support to get back on track. And so that balance isn't the same everywhere. So it'll take me some time to figure out that balance. Mm-hmm. Whereas 9th grade students, they'll probably say hands-on, because I'll be more engaged with them for a longer period of time than maybe the senior class, who will be, senior year is quick. It's over much faster than I think students know how fast senior year finishes. I would be curious how many seniors right now recognize that they're kind of done in a month, and that's the end of high school. Mm-hmm. It goes really fast the senior year.
Absolutely. So do you have any examples that you think would be worth bringing up? I heard an interesting one, I remember when you were interviewing with us, mm-hmm. about a high school play in which you helped your school improve. Do you have any examples of projects or policies that you think reflect how you like to lead in high school?
Yeah, one of the criticisms, the current school I've been at for the last 4 years, the kids' biggest criticism was just a lack of spirit. That kids kind of came to school, they chased high grades, they maybe played some sports, but really there wasn't a whole lot of affection for being at school, and they didn't take a great deal of pleasure in other people's success. And so we tried different things, and some things worked and some things didn't. But eventually we figured out what made kids want to hang around and spend more time at school, either socially or supporting their peers. And it's about trying things and not being afraid to fail. You're going to try some things, they don't go so well, and then you just try something else. But eventually we've managed to build, we have barbecues before the first soccer game of the season, and to make it more interesting, this year the student council is inviting other schools to attend. So we'll look after other schools' athletes and those kind of things, kind of like you do at a booster
right
here.
That's awesome.
That's new for us. We also overlap things, so we'll have this year, like before the play, there was a competition in the gymnasium between students and teachers, and kids can kind of hang around for an hour, and then we start the play and we get better turnout. Instead of doing small plays that were of high artistic value, we do a big musical. Who doesn't know High School Musical? More people show up to watch High School Musical than to watch something absurdist and a little more challenging. So finding that balance and just making school an enjoyable place for kids to be.
The IB, or in some line of light, in your own personal example, which is, it's obviously a big thing at AIS, much like other schools. And it was interesting though, I thought you mentioned how there's different educational programs for everyone. So AIS, it's not mandatory to take the IB diploma here. Previously they offered the Matura, which is an Austrian program. Mm-hmm. I believe that's stopping because of new requirements by the Austrian government, but that there's still the option always to do the normal American diploma as well and take some IB certificates. So I guess the question is, how does a school cater to students when you have to deal with these different platforms? Because, yeah.
That's a great question. And you want to be a school that's flexible enough to meet kids' needs, but you also want to prepare kids well for college. I do think of the programs that are organized and structured. I do think the IB diploma is one of the best college preparatory programs. The number of students I've worked with over the years who say first year of college is actually easier than the last year of high school, which makes sense because you don't spend all day in classes in your first year of university like you do in high school, but you're doing basically the same workload. The organizational skills, the ability to deal with stress, time management, all those things that are a little bit painful during the IB diploma make the transition to college that much easier. Which is great, but it's not necessarily the right time in every person's life. I don't think kids progress by timelines. They progress, in developmentally appropriate ways. So for some kids, a couple of certificates. I've also worked with kids who don't do the full IB diploma, but they do 5 or 6 HLs before they finish high school, and it's because that's what works for them. And so I think being flexible But also it puts an obligation on the school then to help kids figure out in 9th and 10th grade what is the right match for them in 11th and 12th grade. And that can be challenging as well, but they're good challenges.
Mm-hmm. I think people are curious. One of the things that they've noticed with principals coming and going is the stance they take on extracurriculars, and especially at AIS, but when it's a smaller school where kids are often going away on sports tournaments, are often going away for arts tournaments. Just last weekend I was at a debate tournament, for instance, in Spain. And so I guess the question is, do you believe that the amount of time, what do you weigh more, is I guess my question. The amount of time that you lose at school or the experiences you get outside of school?
Yeah, you value both, right? And again, I don't know that it's tough, and I know it's my job to make a policy of this is how we do it, but it's tough to make a policy and say you're only allowed to do one sport, one activity like debate or MUN, and one community service trip, and then say, oh, you actually don't really need to go to class to do spectacularly brilliantly well, so it's okay if it's tough to find a policy or a rule that works for everybody. I do like putting some of that obligation on students, that it some degree it's your choice. So maybe you do debate in 9th and 10th grade, but by the time 11th and 12th grade roll around, you realize, I need to roll that back. As a coach, it kills me when a kid doesn't play their senior year because they've got college apps and they've got internal assessments, and that always hurts a bit, but you have to be respectful of that decision, if it's the right decision. But I also think sometimes it's good when a coach pulls a kid aside and says, what do you mean you're not coming? 3 years we have invested in you. Yes, you're coming out to, let's talk to your parents. And so I think as long as kids are talking to coaches, talking to teachers, talking to counselors, and making informed decisions, that's about the best we can do. But occasionally I think the school does need to set some barriers of where we step in and say, based on where you're at, maybe we don't play sports second season. Maybe we focus on some academics.
I think the last thing I wanted to bring up today was student life, but then also student life outside of school. You mentioned, Vienna is a little bit different from maybe other schools, and in my experience it's interesting because when you go to some schools that are places like in the Middle East or in other parts of the world where there isn't a whole lot to do outside of the school, it means that the school is often that community. And so when you're in schools that have a great city surrounding them,
right.
Then it's a different type of community that has to be formed in the school. And then there's also a question, which is how do you deal with the cultural context of the city around you? So for instance, this is just an example, and so to think of this as in a broader sense though, but for instance, in Europe or in Austria, the drinking age is 16.
Mm-hmm.
So high school students can go out and buy a glass of wine or go, a thing of beer or whatever. And whereas in other countries in the U.S., that's it's a very, very different culture.
It's about 5 years difference.
Yeah, 5 years difference, which is a large amount of time. And so I guess when you have these different communities in the school, sometimes it creates conflict, and sometimes it creates questions of how do you deal with these different cultural contexts within a community. How does the school adapt to that? Do you have any stance on that, or?
Schools traditionally are conservative places, right?
Right.
We're not, although we're accused of being liberal hotbeds, we're not on the cutting edge of moving things forward. And so in that conservative, you want to be accepting of people's stances and their principles, but you also don't want to force things on people as well. So I think living in a Muslim country was good for me, because I think going in I would have said, well, absolutely, if that's the culture. But then you're like, oh, there's all kinds of different people here, and maybe those clothes don't work, and yes, it's your right to wear those clothes, but do you really want to offend other people? Is that really what are you trying? So you begin to have some of those TOK types of thoughts and conversations where you're looking at perception, looking at language, and looking at values, and looking at beliefs, and you start to realize that there's a time and a place for things. Is prom better with a champagne toast? Maybe, certainly more mature and feels more mature. Is prom worse without a champagne toast? Probably not. And so it's just one of those things. So I think you have to look at the whole community as well. The local culture it has to be embraced and supported within the school, but you also need to be sensitive to the fact that there's going to be some people at that champagne toast who aren't going to consume the alcohol for different reasons. And so are you making those people uncomfortable, and is it really necessary to make them uncomfortable? And there's all kinds of perspectives to take. So there's the host culture of the country we're in, but then there's also the school culture, and we do get to define the school culture. Right.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for this interview, and I hope the community got to learn a little bit more about you. Is there anything else you'd like to add or say to the school with this public forum?
Yeah, thanks to you, and thanks for the opportunity, and I'm excited, my wife's excited, and my son was excited when he was here in the winter. It's the first time he'd seen that kind of snowfall before, so that was good, but now he's a little bit shy, a little bit nervous. But we're really pleased to have the opportunity to join a community like AIS. We look forward to spending a good number of years here.
We look forward to having you too.
Thank you.
Again.
All right.